extra bit of observational value. Thank you, Logan, you were great. I moved my record sticker because I'm an idiot. Anyway, welcome to everybody who's interested in learning about basics for the Atlas. I am not an idiot, I'm Evan Adams. Logan introduced himself earlier, but we did that off video. We're gonna talk a little bit about overall Atlas goals, a little bit about how we try to parse out our effort. Then we're going to focus on breeding codes, so essentially what you're trying to, in addition to just telling us that you saw an animal, what sort of evidence do you have that they're breeding in that location? And that's the big thing that we get with the Atlas that you just don't get with kind of other projects. We really want that breeding information. And Logan's going to talk about how you give that to us. So how you use eBird, how you operate that, and try to get through kind of as many issues as you might have on trying to get us the data, because I know that can be tricky sometimes as well. So that's the two main things that we're going to be talking about today. If you feel like you know this already and you want to go to another group, feel free. No harm, no foul. If you want to know more about anything else that we're not talking about, just let us know, and we will give you as much information as we can. So the Atlas generally, what do we need? There are kind of 5 main pieces of information that we need from you. And a lot of what we do with eBird really helps us get all of this. So this is why eBird is kind of an important component of this. But first, oops, I need to click on the screen here. So first of all, you need to tell us, what did you see? In this case, we need to know what bird species you saw. So that means when you're, let's say you're looking at your feeder and you see a northern cardinal come in, you need to be able to tell us that that's a northern cardinal. Now, just because if you know what a northern cardinal is and you don't know every species that's in Maine, that's okay. You just need to be able to tell us about the species that you can identify. You also need to tell us when you saw it. And so for this, we just mean day and time. So one of the nice things about using eBird is that if you submit a record through the app, it'll automatically stamp it with the date and time that you observe the animal. And so that's one of the reasons why it's quite nice to do that. If you're not using eBird to directly enter information, you're gonna have to let us know that it was Saturday at 10:45 a.m. or something like that. Saturday, let's say this coming Saturday is, the 23rd of April. So we need some specific information there. We need to know where you saw it. And this just means like your latitude, longitude. So like if you've got your smartphone up and it shows you where you are on the map, that's what we need to know. Again, one of the cool things about the eBird app is that it'll just give us that automatically. And so that takes that burden off of you. If you don't use the app, that means you're going to have to give us a good estimate of where you are. We need to know how many of the things you saw. So if you saw 2 cardinals, we really would like to know that. If you saw 5, we'd really like to know that. So we need a little bit on the counting information. Again, this is facilitated through eBird fairly nicely. And we need to know what it was doing. And the what it was doing bit is the tricky part that's new for people who are atlasing. I think a lot of folks who do birding or either out on the trails or in the comfort of their own homes looking at their feeders are pretty comfortable with identifying birds and looking up how to identify birds. You're interested in looking at them, but for the Atlas, we need to know a little bit more. We need to know about what kind of behaviors it was using and how we can use that to help us understand if they were breeding in this area or not. And so we'll be going over a lot of those today and giving you a lot of examples of what they look like and hopefully just give you a better understanding of what we want on this side of things. But the other 4 things are also incredibly important. We really need to know all of that stuff. If we don't know where you are, we can't figure out which Atlas block you're from. We don't know what species is. We don't know which map to make it a part of. We don't know when. We don't know if the data is valid. And so all these things are really, really matter for us pulling together all of the data at the end of the Atlas. And just further want to emphasize, if you can identify a species in Maine and tell us what they're doing, you can help the Atlas. You don't have to be able to identify everything, but if you can do something, you can definitely help us out. And if you're unsure about what that is, please contact us, and we will help you figure out a plan for what you can do to help us with the Atlas. So just to reiterate what Glenn said, there is a question of where I should Atlas. And at this stage in the Atlas, in year 5, we have a lot fewer Atlas blocks that we need to get to. And so what we're really trying to do is we're trying to get to all of our priority blocks. And the priority blocks are essentially, we spread them out across the state evenly so we could try to get a lot of coverage across the entire state. And that's why we want to make sure we get them, is because we know that there's important stuff in there. We want to make sure our coverage across the state is as even as it can be. And so we really want you to focus your effort on priority blocks if possible. This map that Doug talked about, or sorry, Glenn talked about, is really helpful in figuring out where you should go. These are the ones that are, this map is going to identify priority blocks and tell you what you need to do when you get there. Do you need to just spend a bunch of time atlasing and just, spend hours atlasing? Do you need to go there? Do you need to specifically find some species that have been found there before, but we need to confirm them? We need to confirm their breeding. Or do we need to do both those things, or does the block need a lot of help? And so if you're ever wondering, first of all, we will take data from anywhere. If you have data from your backyard, you saw a cardinal nesting in your backyard, then great, let us know. First, maybe that's the only record of a cardinal nesting in that block, and that's going to be really valuable to us. So we take all information. But in the last year of the Atlas, we want to try to get people to these blocks as much as possible. And this tool can be very helpful for getting you there. That said, we're happy to have his help as much as we can. And if this is a bit daunting, I understand. We are happy to talk about it more if you have more questions. So also, just to give you a sense, because this comes up a bit, how do you figure out, when do we say a block is done? Why aren't these blocks done yet? It's usually a combination of we haven't spent enough time surveying in them or not. We feel like we haven't covered all the habitats well enough, so that's a little bit harder to tell. And we haven't confirmed enough species. And so as you'll see when I talk about breeding codes, essentially the rankings are, you can observe a species, you think it's possible they're breeding, you think it's probable they're breeding, and you're confirming that they're breeding in the block. And we want to have a pretty good percentage of the total number of species in a block that have been found. We want those to be confirmed. Now, not all species, not all individuals that you see are going to be breeding, obviously, but we think that a large number should be. And so we want to see at least 50% of them to be confirmed. And so usually when a block isn't done yet, it's because you need to go to a block and spend some more time atlasing, or you need to take some more birds and confirm their breeding. There's a couple different rules for remote blocks. I wouldn't worry about them now, but for the most part, the previous slide is accurate. So let's talk a little bit about breeding codes, because this is the tricky bit. And we'll show you can enter these directly into eBird, or so that part is quite nice now, and we'll be showing you how to do that later. And so the other thing is there are literal codes, there's a 1-letter code for all of these things, or 1 to 2-letter code for all of these things, and those are also into eBird. So don't stress out about not remembering what NE specifically stands for. You should be able to look these things up in the app as well. And so there's a lot of different ways we can sort of determine if an animal is breeding in the state of Maine. And as I was saying before, we have possible breeding codes, probable breeding codes, and confirmed breeding codes. And so the possibles are more or less a bird is singing, which is an indicator that a bird is trying to be territorial in that area, and birds are usually territorial because they're trying to nest there, right? So that's telling us that a bird's interested in that location. Or you think it's an appropriate habitat. Now, this is a bit of a judgment call, obviously, but let's say you have a cardinal that's hanging out in your backyard. The cardinals like nesting in people's backyards. If you have some bushes, and you think that's appropriate habitat, you can call that appropriate habitat, and that's a possible. And more or less possible is a shoulder shrug. We're could be breeding. Who knows? We're not sure yet. When we get to probable and confirmed, it gets a bit more serious. And so the probable categories are more or less we think it's really likely that they're breeding, but we just haven't seen a nest, eggs, or young yet. And so probables are often things like you're catching them building a nest, or maybe you're doing something that is prospecting for a nest, or singing for a really long time in a given area, or seeing a lot of the same species in one area in particular. Things that are indicating that there's likely a nest in there somewhere. And so just as a quick example, there's various types of nest building. For wrens and woodpeckers, they build multiple nests, and that's not always indicative, so that's why that's probable. There's a territory being held for 7+ days. So you've been to an area and you come back to it, and you've said, these animals are still here. This is indicating to me that they still want to be here, and that's probably because there's a nest. You can see courtship, a display flight, or copulation. So these are behaviors indicating that they want to be nesting in these locations. You could be visiting a probable nest site. This is often cavity nesters. We see them sneaking around a cavity, like a hole in a tree or a nest box you have in your yard. And that might be indicating to you that they're interested in it. They could be exhibiting agitated behavior. This is a pretty broad category, but that might be indicating that they're defending a particular spot. There's a pair in suitable habitat, which is another vague one. If you see a male and female that are sort of hanging out in a location. Multiple 7+ singing males in a relatively small area, again, a high density of animals, and then singing male present for 7+ days, indicating that there's a long amount of persistent activity. So these are all things that make us think that there's probably a nest, but we just haven't seen it yet. It hasn't been totally confirmed. And if you look over at the confirmed codes, you can see that nest with young, nest with eggs, and occupied nest, recently fledged young, these are all just like visual proof that there is a nest, there is young, there are eggs, they are trying to nest in this location. And once you've done that, that species for the block that you're in, we're done. Like we've learned what we need to learn about that, right? Like we have determined that cardinal is nesting in your block, and now we don't really have to worry about cardinals in your block very much anymore because we've confirmed it already. The difference between one confirmation and 100 in a block isn't really important to us for the atlas for this purpose at least. So once you get your cardinal, then you can go on and think about your chickadee or your house sparrow or whatever else you have floating around that you might want to use. So I'm going to talk a little bit about these codes and give you some examples of them to help you get a sense of like kind of what we're looking for here. So here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to talk about the possible codes. There's not a lot of great pictures of these. Again, they're mostly just like a male that's singing or it's in an appropriate habitat. You know, if you're just sort of birding casually, a lot of your breeding codes will be this because you heard it sing or you think it's in a reasonable habitat. It's like, oh, it's a Louisiana water thrush and it's in a kind of area with running wet water. Okay, cool. Like that's a good habitat for it. But it probably means you didn't look very hard or you didn't spend a lot of time with the animal. Just to give you an example, we have some red-winged blackbirds that are now doing this. This bird isn't actively singing, it's sort of looking there. This could be either an H for being an appropriate habitat. It's a red-winged blackbird sitting on a cattail. That's a good spot for red-winged blackbirds to nest. So, hey, that's probably appropriate habitat. If it starts singing, which they are right now, then you can say that this is maybe a singing male. This is certainly a male, but it could be a singing male in the appropriate habitat. And that says that there's maybe a possible bird that's breeding there. But obviously not a lot of codes there, and the habitat's a bit of a judgment call. And we really don't want a ton of possibles. We want things to get you probable and confirmed as much as possible. So that's really what we're shooting for. Now, there's a lot of different codes here. I went through them already, and there's a little bit more detail on these. If you go to the Atlas manual at neatbirdatlas.org, I think. Is it org, Logan? I think it is. You know, you can get even more information about like what these codes are, but I'm just going to go through, for the sake of time, I'm going to go through and kind of just show you a couple photos and give you some examples of what some of these codes are so you have a better sense. I will say that if you get more and more into atlasing, the singing male is present for 7 days. That's a nice one to use if you're having trouble getting good looks at birds, but we'll talk about some of the ones that are a bit more photographable here. So these are some bluebirds that are hanging out near a nest box. And so this is a probable code of N, where they're hanging out in a location that could contain a nest, but doesn't yet. And so bluebirds and a lot of cavity nesters will actually go through and they'll scout for nesting locations beforehand. And this is them doing that, right? And so if we were trying to evaluate this behavior, we saw this, we were hanging out and looking at this nest box, we would say this is them looking at a location that could have a nest but doesn't yet. Now, if you go into that nest box and there is a nest in there, then perhaps there's a whole new discussion about what kind of code this might be. But this is them scouting this out. So we're calling this a pair in reasonable habitat. We have 2 piping plovers here, and the piping plovers are paired up, and they're in a location that seems like they could be breeding. And this, if you feel really confident, this is a male-female pair, which is tricky with plovers sometimes. But if you felt confident in that, you could use this as evidence that this was a probable breeding location. For a house wren, we have or winter wren, Wrens do this. This also, they prospect for nests. They do a lot of weird things with nesting, but they might be looking in locations to another cavity to put their eggs. They do this a lot. And so for wrens in particular, we would say that this is them prospecting for or building a nest in a location that they could then eventually become an actual occupied active nest for them. And the same things with woodpeckers. This downy woodpecker here is building a nest, but they build multiple nests per year. And so we're not quite sure they're going to occupy it yet, which is why this is only a probable. So you have to be a little bit careful with those kind of species, the cavity nesters in particular. So if you see a cavity nester building a nest, check your atlas manual. But more or less, it's a really good sign. That's an indication that these guys are interested in breeding there, which is really what we want to see. Let's see, and so this is an example of a chickadee actually doing something similar, where it is it's actually excavating an area and pulling out some of the material and from a dead snag. And so that is indication that they are perhaps building nests, but without seeing the nest particularly, we have to be a little bit cautious about that. Yeah, same thing. So these are chickadees excavating and pulling material out of a cavity. The other thing that you'll see a lot in the probable categories is carrying nesting material, which is what this gray catbird is doing. And so the catbird has a bit of a twig in its mouth and it's flying around with it. That's indicating that they're building a nest potentially, but we would really like to get a better look at that nest. So if you're seeing animals doing this, remember that like being an atlaser is like being a detective. You're trying to figure out what these birds are up to and how you can learn more about them. And so when you see them carrying nest material, great, that's awesome. That means they're probably building an area. But if you see them fly away from nest material, maybe you should follow them and see where they're going, and you could find the nest, which would be confirmation that they are that they are breeding in that area. So that can be quite nice. Mourning dove as well, doing the same thing. I saw a starling this morning with nesting material in its mouth. There's a lot of birds building nests right now. You would be surprised if you're watching animals and how many times you see them fly around with sticks in their mouths, particularly this time of year. It can be a great way to figure out maybe where their nest is and learn a little bit more about it. Oh, and I think this is a black-throated green. That's what it looks like to me, at least. Black-throated green warbler that's stripping the bark off of a birch tree. Logan, I think. Okay, one second. Okay. Logan, are we good?
I think we are. Yeah. Was it just me that got bumped?
I think it was just you.
Okay. Yep. I'm back and it's resumed the recording. Sorry about that.
No worries. Cool. So we have a long-term monitoring station over in Falmouth, and when you have a bird in the hand, you can actually kind of look at other indicators of whether they might be nesting in your location, which is really cool. So there's a lot of secondary sexual characteristics that birds will have that can tell you something about it. So females, for example, they get a little patch on their belly when they're sitting on a nest that can indicate to you that they're breeding in that area. So you probably won't have access to this, but if you're interested in River Point, we are opening it next week. So let me know if you want to come out and check out the area. It's a lot of fun. Okay, I keep clicking out of this somehow. Okay, a couple things I didn't show them, but like the multiple singing males and the 7 days of singing males, those are very helpful codes. If you're having trouble getting good looks at the birds for whatever reason, just if you go on a Saturday, hear a singing bird, go back to the same spot and hear a singing bird, that's improbable. That lets us know the animal's there. So if you're really having trouble getting good looks at what these birds are doing or where they're sneaking off to, birds can be very sneaky when they're building nests. Great information about where they're singing, going back to locations repeatedly can be a really big help to us. Oh yeah, this is Magnolia Warbler, and let's pretend this bird's been singing there for 7 straight days. Great photo too. We will note, so when you have only singing information for a bird, or you don't have direct observations of the nest or nestlings or some other thing, we have what are called breeding safe dates. And so this is essentially to prevent people from spending a lot of time kind of on effort on birds during times of year where they're really not likely to be breeding. And it's also, if you're going to use a lot of the singing categories, you have to be within the safe dates to use them. So like, chickadees start singing in January sometimes. That's not really indicative of like whether or not they are breeding there yet. So this is designed to sort of help keep our efforts into a good location. As you can see, the first safe date for animals in the state of Maine, for birds in the state of Maine, is the great horned owl, which was the end of January, because owls nest very, very early. And you can see many of the birds' safe dates are already active. We have a whole big sheet of all the safe dates for all the birds. Pretty soon here, we're essentially from now until the beginning of June, we will go into pretty much all of our safe dates, but it is kind of a steady trickle through them all. So I would say if you're using singing to help the atlas out, make sure that you know your safe dates and know them well. That said, if you have breeding evidence, we know the safe dates too. Just add them to your eBird record, and we can sort it out later. But just for your own sanity, the safe dates can be very, very helpful, and we recommend you be familiar with them. Here's a broader example. Here's even more species, and we have this for all the species in Maine. So if you have a question about whether or not a species is safe or not to be counted for a given metric, then this is it. Oh yeah, even more. I forgot I wanted to show you all of it. So you can kind of see at the end of the year, right? Same thing, like great horned owls, like no longer safe about a week into August, and it varies for each species because some species breed for a really long period of time, and some of them are relatively short. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about safe dates or individual species for this. We have this list up where, so if you have a question about it, we have it on our website. So let's talk about the confirmed codes, the best codes, the one where we want you all to get to. These are essentially finding nests that are active, birds on nests, animals kind of tending to nests, either by bringing food back to their partner or their young, or they're carrying fecal sacs out from the nest outside of it. They have to sort of like clean the nests up when the nestlings are in there. And other sorts of, and some behavioral evidence that there's a nest like right there. And so these are the gold standard. This is what we want. These are all the good stuff, and they can be really hard to find sometimes, which is why it gets tricky. So let's talk about this. We have a Nelson's. We have a Saltmarsh sparrow of some kind gathering food. And so during the nesting season, birds will bring food back to their mate or to their young that are in their nest. And we call that a food carry. And that's the code CF for carrying food. And when birds are bringing food back to a nest, that's a confirmation for us. That's really good. There are some species that do carry food that's not part of nesting, so be a little bit cautious, but pretty much all the songbirds, don't worry about them. If they're carrying food, they have a nest. They'll also, if you see them carrying something, follow them. That's usually a good sign. You can also find a bird on a nest. This is a red-eyed vireo that's on one of their very characteristic, very tightly woven cup nests that are often in deciduous trees. If you see a bird come to a nest like this and sit on it, then you are in the money. I had this happen, and I've had a number of red-eyed vireos that I've seen sit on nests like this, and it's always great. They're really cool looking nests, and if you can watch a bird come back to a nest like that, then that's it. That's the deal. You found them nesting, and that's a code ON for on nest. I guess know what you saw there. You can also, this is actually like multiple codes, so you can pick your favorite here. They're on a nest. They're also feeding young. You can see them dipping their head in and depositing food in for the young that are in the nest. And so you can pick your favorite here. They're all telling you it's confirmed. And so there's no stress, but this robin here has a good little spot. This yellow warbler here has a little bit of food in its bill, and it's likely carrying it back to its nest. So this is a food carry, which is a nice confirmation. I get a lot of my my nest confirmations from food carries because it's relatively easy to see a male with a bit of food in its mouth making a very purposeful flight. I usually follow it up as much as I possibly can, but food carries can be a great way to get some quick confirmations for birds. This is a picture of fecal sacs. You'll see birds actually carrying fecal sacs from their nests outside of it and depositing in the locations. I would say you don't see this all the time, but you do see it. And this is confirmation that they have a active nest that is producing feces that they can remove from it. And so this can be a nice one as well, though a little less fun than food carries in my opinion. This is another example. I'm not even sure what species this is because this is in my photo, but another bird that's on a nest. You can see the little tail feather sticking out as it's sort of sitting tight here onto this nest. So that's another ON code. And we have two American redstarts here that are either feeding young. So actually they are feeding young. This one has food in its mouth. This one's dipping its head into the nest. They're also on an active nest. This is another one that's multiple codes. If you're seeing stuff like this, you're doing great. You're having a great time. And then we have a sapsucker on a tree. I forget what we thought this code was. I think if you're seeing stuff like this, then you're doing a great job. And I would try to see if it's depositing food or try to get some sense of how active that nest might be. And tree swallows that are feeding young. When you're seeing nestlings at all, that means they're nesting there. This is a great sign. And let's see, these are fledglings, can be a little bit tougher to see. These are some actually I'm not sure what species this is, probably song sparrow looks like. These are song sparrow fledglings that looks like they're getting fed by the adult here. And so when you have fledgling young, that's indicating that a bird nested there, and that can be a great sign. Fledglings can be hard to ID. I'd be a little bit careful about doing it if you're not familiar with the species, but usually if you're watching another bird feed another, probably one of them is a fledgling. Here's a really young robin. This is a very young bird. And so this is another young bird here. Same thing here. Logan, do you want to talk eBird stuff? So that was it on breeding codes. Let us know if you have any questions about like the type of behaviors that we're interested in. And now we're going to talk about how we take all the information you're collecting for us and give it to us so that we can put it up on all of our maps, make sure that it's all correct, and use it later for all the cool stuff we want to use it for.
All right, so just give me a moment here to switch over.
You want to switch? Okay, cool.
Yeah, that probably makes sense. Let's see.
Agreed. Well, let me know if you have any questions while we're hanging out, or you can just relax for a moment. We certainly appreciate everyone's attention.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. I'm having some dual monitor issues here. Let's see.
It is the bane
It really
of
is.
screen sharing.
All right, let me just get to where we were. I had it all queued up and ready to go, and then of course, as soon as I went to screen share, it stopped working.
That sounds about right. It sounds like about my experience with Zoom.
Okay, are you guys seeing the presentation? Perfect. Okay, so just in the interest of time, because I know it's already getting late, and I want to leave some room for questions. I'll move pretty quickly through this, but with the note that there are a lot of useful tools out there already talking about some of this stuff. So on the Bird Atlas website at maine.gov, there are a number of how-to videos that have been created for using eBird, submitting checklists using your computer, using your phone, changing the Atlas portal, things like that, where I will touch on those things, but I'll move fast. I'll just give you an introduction to this, and then we can jump into questions. I want to make sure we have time. Okay. So yeah, so as Evan had mentioned, eBird is sort of the primary tool that we're using to collect a lot of this data. One way or another, the Atlas data is going into eBird. So traditionally, Atlas projects, a few decades ago, folks were going out and taking notes and doing paper lists. Nowadays, we have this wonderful resource from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, where we can go and input the data, make these checklists, and basically instantly get that data over to folks like Glenn and Evan. So yeah, we briefly talked on this. This is a slide on the portals for this year. For all intents and purposes, we're going to be using the main Bird Atlas portal. Again, there is a how-to video on how to set these portals, but essentially the portals are just within eBird areas where checklists can be deposited. So this is sort of what eBird looks like when you're on a computer. This is, you can tell that Doug put this presentation together. This is what it looks like if you were to look at the My eBird tab on eBird. And there's a wealth of resources on there where you can see all of the checklists that you've submitted. You can see where you've submitted them, track your progress throughout the year, all the different species that you've seen. It's a really great resource. Again, this is just another one of the resources on eBird showing the distribution. You can tell where Doug does a lot of his atlasing or his birding down in southern Maine. Okay, so this is when you go to enter data into eBird, it's going to look like one of these two things. So you can either enter it on your computer at ebird.org, or you can download the eBird app for your smartphone. As Evan mentioned, the app has a lot of really excellent features in that you can just fire it up, start your checklist, and it'll get the time, date, and location where you're doing your atlasing. However, if you don't have a smartphone, you can still submit data using the website, and we'll kind of show you what each of those things look like. So these are what the checklists look like in each of the different resources. So on the right here, you see the smartphone app where you can essentially go through and you can search the name of whatever species you see, and you tap on it, and you're able to put the number of that species that you see. And then it also gives you the option, you see right next to chipping sparrow, you see that little FY code, that's the breeding code. So you're able to enter the breeding code right at the same time from a little drop-down menu within eBird. You can also go back and look at checklists that you've put together on the app through the website as well. So these are the same checklists that you're looking at here, just in 2 different formats. This is what it looks like when you're entering the data using the website. So you would essentially just scroll through, type in the number of species that you see, and then you see right next to mallard, it says add breeding code. There's a little button there. You would click on that, and then you would select the appropriate breeding code for what you've seen. And then as you submit your checklist on eBird, there's this little question that's asking if you're submitting a complete checklist or not. What this essentially means is that it's not necessarily that you were able to identify every species that was out there. So if there was one bird in particular you didn't recognize, it would still be considered a complete checklist. What this really means is you're not intentionally discluding birds that you saw while you were out atlasing. So if you were out atlasing, you reported everything that you've seen, it's a complete checklist. So yeah, so you are able to put quite a bit of detail in here as well. You can add photos of what you see, and certainly we encourage that. When that's an option, especially if you're questioning whether or not your identification is spot on. That gives us the ability to look at that and help you with that. You can include notes on your trip. You see this little map here that is a track that was made using the eBird app, and that shows exactly on a map where it was that the effort was made. Another example there. Okay, and this just shows you sort of the power of eBird. All these lights are this is essentially eBird activity around the world. So as you see it lit up, these are all checklists for around the world. So it's a growing project, and it's quite an amazing achievement, really. You can go on and see the distribution of a lot of these birds, and the distribution of effort that's being made is really very impressive. So let's see here. Yeah, so on eBird itself, you can go on and you can look up species maps for the main bird atlas. So if you were interested in something in particular, you could just type in the name of the species to see if it's been reported in your area or where it has been reported. You can look at regions within the atlas. You can look at the blocks themselves. You can look at effort that's being made to see where it is we need to focus. So yeah, there's just a really great amount of useful things on there, and I recommend, just if you're totally new to it, go peruse it a little bit, make an account and explore that, and then as you discover different things, look at the how-to videos for really specific simple instructions of how to actually do the nitty-gritty work of setting up your app, the eBird app, or submitting a checklist. And again, it's emphasizing the where, how, and what. It's exactly these are the things that we're trying to, the type of information we're trying to gather with our atlasing effort, and eBird makes it really easy for you to collect a lot of this information. So.
Just before we go to questions, I'll actually show you what eBird looks like on your iPhone. Logan, if you let me take over.
You got it.
cool. So if you are an iPhone user, I'm just gonna, or our smartphone user generally, I'll show you. I happen to use an iPhone, but it works either way. Right, so this is my iPhone. So if we're gonna go look at eBird, just to show you what this is all about, it's actually quite cool. It'll tell you what your date and time is. It'll ask you if you want to record your track, which you do. You definitely want to let it know where you are in space. It actually lets you select your portal, which is quite nice. Again, we want to be making sure that we're in the main Bird Atlas portal, because that's where we want to be all summer long. Really cool stuff. Actually, I don't know if people haven't messed around with this, you can use the Explore tab to figure out where birds are around you. It's going to search all the eBird sightings from all around you. And you can even search for particular hotspots. You can look for things that aren't on your main life list or what have you. It's really a great tool. But if we're starting a checklist, let's say that I saw a northern cardinal. So I just hit start checklist. We're going to type in northern cardinal. It thinks they're unlikely at my house, which is wrong because they're out there right now. And we can say that we saw one. Most of the time, eBird's right about this. I'm not quite sure. Maybe it's not connected properly. But we tell it how many we saw. Let's say we saw one of them. We can add whatever details and text we want. But we can go right down here and there's a breeding code. And we can say, well, what we saw is that it was carrying nesting materials. And I can click on carrying nesting materials. It'll tell me that's the CN code. And it'll tell you what it means. Notably also, they are all color coded by whether they're possible, probable, or confirmed. So possibles are the light purples, the H's and the S's, the habitats and singings. The S7 all the way through physiological evidence is all the probables. And then the dark colors at the bottom, there are all the confirms. And so we can tell it that this northern cardinal was confirmed nesting. Now you can see it on the right-hand side there. You can also, if you click up at the top, you can actually see where I am, which is my house. And you can see where it thinks I am, what all the other locations around it are. It's very cool. So you can use all this information. It'll actually follow your track as you move around if you want it to. And then when you're done, you can hit stop. You can stop your track. And then you can give it whatever other information you want. You can make sure that you're sending it to the right portal. It tells you it's the main Bird Atlas. And you can hit continue. And you can be providing data to the atlas just that quick. And so there are a couple other questions. There's is this a complete checklist, which Logan mentioned. You can change how many people were with you. You can make sure you have to specify your location. Fortunately, your phone helps you out doing all these things. But really, eBird is not perfect, but it is a very nice way for us to get a large amount of information. And if you have a smartphone and you're comfortable using it, I think this is one of the best ways of getting us information very quickly. It can be very cool. So if you have any other questions about eBird, we're happy to kind of go through that as you want. But yeah, that's what we had to talk about today. I know we're getting to getting kind of later on in the evening here, and so obviously it's your evening. You can use it as you want, but we're happy to sit here and answer questions for as long as you have them. Or you can head back to I don't think there's anything going on at the main session afterwards, right, Logan? This is it.
Yeah, I think you're right.
This is it. Yeah. So any other questions? Happy to have them. Are we still recording? We are.
Julie, are you trying to ask a question? I'm sorry. It looks you're muted. I didn't know. It looked like you were talking. Not to single you out.
She was talking, but not to us.
I was talking to myself as I was typing a question.
I see.
It did not occur to me that I could unmute and ask a question. I don't know.
Oh yeah,
you totally can. Please.
It's a small group.
Okay, thanks.
I have talked far too much already.
So I had a question about using eBird. I wondered if there's a function on it to like ask other birders questions, like for for example, when I've been trying to locate a bird, when I see that other people have spotted it somewhere, and I kind of want to know, like, well, hey, can you give me a tip? Like, where were you?
Right.
Yeah, is there a way to do that, or like, am I missing it, or there's not that?
So
Well, there's no like social component to it, right? There's no way, there's not like a chat box that you can be like, hey, where did you see this? But that explore tab I showed you on the app, you can also explore all the data on the website too. You can search if you're interested in, there's a glossy ibis in Portland right now, right? So if you want to know where the glossy ibis is, and the answer is Deering Oaks Park. But if you wanted to know that, you could search for glossy ibis and find like all the recent observations.
Okay.
And eBird will tell you where the people were roughly while you're doing that. So you can use it that way. If you have a question about like bird ID, Cornell has an app called the Merlin app.
Oh, yep, I have that.
Yep, and they do have some new bird song identification tools on there too that they've been testing. I will say they can be good, but they can also be wrong. So be a little bit cautious about only using the Merlin song ID to sort of say what something is, but can be a great teaching tool and is right a lot of the time.
Cool. I'm completely new to actually birding. I've been a long time armchair bird enthusiast,
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just trying to learn the sort of tips and tricks of how do I spot these things?
Yeah, so I think some of the best ways to get tips like that, honestly, I kind of wish Doug were here. This is like what Doug does for a living.
Right.
He works for Maine Audubon.
You people are getting paid for this?
Some of us. So Doug does sponsored bird walks with Maine Audubon. We actually have stuff over. I mentioned River Point Bird Observatory. We have a bunch of educational stuff out there. If you're interested in birds and want to know more, go on bird walks with people. That is a great way to get information. And actually, atlasing is great too, because if you're interested in doing some atlasing with somebody because maybe you want to see how somebody else does it or just get a little more comfortable with the birds, there's a lot of people out birding this summer. And so they can be a great way to meet up with folks who know a little bit more, a little bit different things than you know, and learn a little bit.
Yeah, I'm the total newbie who's out there like, okay, like taking a picture, like, okay, I guess this is what I'm doing. Yeah.
Perfect. That's awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, you guys.
Yeah. I put a link in the chat as well. I'll put in a little plug for the Maine Birds Google group. So that's a great resource, especially as you start out. That does have a little bit of the social element. It's not atlasing specific, but it's a great place to go on and see what people are reporting and actually talk to some other Maine birders. You can find out a lot of stuff there.
Fuzzy pictures for bird ID are a common occurrence.
Definitely.
Yeah, and we are doing the field trips on Saturday. So if you are available in Saturday morning, that's a great time to get out and maybe meet some people who are also going to be birding in your vicinity if you can. And that can be a nice way to meet up with people too.
Yeah, and reach out to your regional coordinator because they may know of other volunteers that are going out. And a lot of times working together on this stuff makes it a lot easier. And like Evan said, it's really great to go out with someone who's done a good bit of birding and kind of have them show you the ropes.
Yeah, birding is like a lifelong adventure of learning, and so it is. There are many things I still don't know, and that's one of the fun things about it. So everyone has things they don't know, and it's a pretty, I think, helpful and supportive community that way.
What if we can't get to the meetings that they're having on Saturday? Is there another way that we can contact them?
So feel free to contact the people who are leading the various groups if you want to try to meet up with folks and or get a little bit more info, and depending on the area you're in. I mean, it's by no means mandatory, but if you really want to do something like that, there will be, we're also moving into spring migration, which is a great time to get out and go birding, period. I don't know where you're located precisely, but as I mentioned, Doug does a lot of trips for Maine on. There's a lot of opportunities to get out there and kind of and get birding generally. If you want to talk specifically atlasing, I think Logan mentioned talk to your regional coordinator or email Glenn at mainbirdatlas at, what is it, as a Gmail?
It's at Gmail. Yep.
Yeah, at gmail.com. Glenn will happily try to find who to kind of hook you up with, and so you can talk. But yeah, sorry if you aren't able to go on Saturday. We realize not everyone is able to do that, but
So the regional coordinator is the ones that are leading those groups. Is that who I should contact?
sometimes, yeah. I mean, if you're leading, if I would contact the person who's leading the trip in your area, or just contact Glenn at Main Bird Atlas.
Okay, thank you.
Kate, you got a question?
I just wanted to ask where people are from who are in this room. Because I'm one of the regional coordinators. So if you're in my neck of the woods, maybe I can help you out with bird walks. I'll be doing one in Farmington a couple weeks from now. But I'm assuming most of you aren't in this area.
Yeah. If you are in Portland area or want to do the Portland bird walk, that's me and Brad Zitsky, actually. And Doug's always around and good. So if you're down in the South, feel free to contact me and let me know. If you're in Farmington, Kate is definitely your person. She's your key contact.
Well, I'll be
Sebago.
Sebago area? I think that is technically, is that in the Portland area or not? Do you remember, Logan?
I think it is. Yeah.
So technically your regional coordinator is Doug Hitchcox, but he isn't leading the trip on Saturday, if that's what your question is. I am. So if you want to know, have more information about the Saturday trip this week, talk to me. If you want to talk to somebody about birding in the greater Portland area, that's Doug.
Okay. Thanks.
No problem.
So I just wanted to chip in and say that I'll be leading the walks in the Farmington area this weekend and 2 weeks from now, but after that, I'll mostly be up in the Dover, Foxcroft, and Carrabassett Valley regions because that's where I coordinate. So
Nice. Carrabassett Valley is awesome.
It is.
I've been having a good time up there. Dover, Foxcroft too. I've discovered some really cool places. So atlasing is wonderful.
It is.
Yeah.
How to look at birds in a whole new way. I've learned a ton about birds in the last 4 years. So
Nice.
it's never too late to start.
Absolutely.
Oh, there were some spaces up around Lincoln that were on your maps. So that's kind of where I'd be, but I don't
Yeah,
know.
no, that's great.
Yeah, actually you're kind of in Glenn's area. So if you want to reach out to him, I'm sure he would happily help you out and get started with some things.
Definitely.
He may not want to. He's had an experience with me. I helped him with the Baxter flowers. I'm not sure how much help, but I went out with him a couple times. So
That's
Glenn's
great.
very patient. I'm sure it was great.
he is.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Tina. I'm in the Mid Coast. I know I'm going out I'm a novice birder. And I'm going out to Augusta this weekend to try that. I've
Great.
listened to some of Doug's presentations and they've been super. So I know I'm looking forward to getting out there, but really new, never Atlas before. I'm really new to just eBird. So I've only just started. So I know when you said how to set the portals up, and so certainly I'll look to find that. I noticed that on the one thing as I was perusing through that, it said there were 2 different portals for Maine.
Right.
Can you speak a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, so this has been a point of confusion for a long time, and we were trying to be super clear about this because there are 2. There's one that's for Maine generally, and there's one for the Maine Bird Atlas. And we want everyone using the Maine Bird Atlas portal. Period. That's it. Yeah, that is all I want to say about it. We just want to use the Bird Atlas portal.
Well, that's easy.
Yeah.
So as soon as I figure out how to change over from just regular eBird to that.
You want me to show you how to do it on the phone again?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
I
So
put
I'll
the
just
how-to
actually-
video in the chat as
Okay.
well. So that's
I'll
there
just show
too.
you now, and just to give you another example. One sec. Sorry, this will take me another moment here. Because there is a couple ways to do it, and sometimes it gets a little weird in the app specifically. Okay. So okay, we're back in eBird again. This is my eBird. So you'll note that like let's see. Can you see my mouse?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Cool. So you see that the portal main bird atlas is right here, right? So this is the correct portal. This is the main bird atlas. If I click on that directly, it'll give me the list of all the portals, which again, there are many. And as you mentioned, there are two. There's main bird atlas here, and then there's main eBird here, right? And again, we want to be main bird atlas. That is our portal. Sometimes though, you don't see that at the screen here. This will be blank, in which case you have to click on the more button down here. And you want to click on settings and accounts right here. And then you have the portal option here. And that's always there. I've never seen that not be there.
Oh,
And so yeah, we just want to make sure we're on main bird atlas, and those are the two places you can find it. Usually, if you're just getting started, it'll set you on eBird broadly. And that's fine for a start, but we want to make sure that we get all of our records flagged. Just so you know, just if you're on the wrong portal, it's not the end of the world. You can change it after the fact too, if you want. And it's not like your data is getting thrown away if it's in the wrong portal, but we need to make sure it gets included in the Atlas specifically. We need to be making sure that we're in the Atlas portal. The way that Adrian describes it, which I think is pretty good, is it's like, it's all going into the big eBird filing cabinet, but which tab it goes under, like which set of folders is the Atlas portal, or is the portal that you give it. So it's all going into the filing cabinet, but to make sure that we can find it correctly, we want to make sure it's going to the main Bird Atlas section of that filing cabinet. I will note, let's see, did I submit a record? This is tonight, right? I can review this. So actually, when you're submitting a record, this is what I was doing earlier. You can actually, it'll tell you up here that like the portal is the main Bird Atlas. And if I got this wrong for whatever, let's say that I have this as the main eBird for some terrible reason. We all know we shouldn't be using this, but I just made a mistake. It'll actually tell me there, and I can go, oh, okay, cool. I can just change it even before I submit the record, which is a nice feature that it didn't used to have. This is kind of one of the recent updates. So yeah, that can be a little bit sticky. That's a common question, is making sure that you're in the right portal and how to do it. Fortunately, eBird's getting a little bit better at letting you know which portal you're in, which is I think some of the confusion about it.
And Tina, I'll be at the Augusta assembly. I keep wanting to call it field trip, but yeah, the Augusta assembly this weekend. So I'll see you there, and we can do some atlasing. I know for a fact we'll be seeing some breeding birds on Saturday, so that should be a lot of fun.
Yeah. And the weather looks nice on Saturday too. So if you are around and available, hopefully it'll be fun. Even food, we'll even give you lunch.
Exactly.
That's how nice we are. What a deal. All right. Any other questions? Or just stuff we want to talk about? Cool birds you've seen recently?
I saw an osprey carrying a stick across the road
Oh, buddy.
weeks for its safe date, and I saw it building a new nest on the power line. So
Awesome.
that's pretty
Cool.
cool.
Osprey make big honking nests. They're so large. It's really cool to watch.
He's got a ways to go on this one.
Got to see a wood duck in a tree.
Oh,
that
so
was-
fun. Oh,
Excellent.
so that's pretty close to its nest then, because that's really the only time they're getting up there.
Yeah.
I have never seen a wood duck nest fledge in real life, but which is sad. I would like to remedy that sometime in the future. But there is a great I think it's Planet Earth has an incredible series of footage from a wood duck fledging in one of the episodes. I think the forests one or the waters one. I forget which one it is. And it's delightful. If you haven't seen it, it is possibly the cutest thing ever.
It really is. Just
A
free
couple
falling in
years
slow
ago.
motion.
A a couple years ago, the trees were kind of late to leaf out. So I saw a female entering a nest. And so I kind of kept an eye on that hole. And a little bit later, I saw her fly to the nest, and then she kind of like perched at the side and was doing something. And later, because I wasn't sure what it was, so I read up about it, and they rotate the eggs when they return to the nest, because they want to keep them, they don't want the outside ones to get too cold. And so that's what she was doing. So then I was able to code that as any nest with eggs.
Nice.
Awesome.
Pretty cool.
That is cool.
And I learned a lot in the process.
Yeah. Yeah, we have wood duck around here, and I haven't seen them. I haven't found one of their nests yet, but we've definitely seen them cruising around on the water with like really, really young ducklings, and that's also very nice. They're very cool. I'd love to see one of those nests. They're so neat. All right. Anything else? Well, I'm not trying to usher you out of here, but if there's no more questions, I think we're all good. So, as Logan was saying, if you have other questions, kind of 2 resources. He gave you kind of the list of the videos we've had from past years, where we kind of get into some of this, some of the eBird stuff, some of the breeding code stuff, and you can hear it from different folks. Like Doug did it a couple years ago. I think Adrian and Logan did it last year.
Yep.
If you want to just talk to somebody, we've all kind of put our various email addresses. I put them in there. We put Glenn's in there because just send everything to Glenn. He coordinates well. Kate put hers in there. So I think we have all kinds of contact information. So please get a hold of us if you have any questions. And otherwise, reach out to the various sources we have. Let us know you're interested, and hopefully have a great time atlasing. As Glenn also mentioned, as a reminder, we're going to be doing weekly Q&As during the summer as well. Oh, thanks, Kate. I guess maybe you didn't put it in earlier, but thank you. And so if you have any questions and you're just, whether you're just getting started or you have an expert level question, whatever it is, we're happy to answer those. And so the Q&As are a great way to sort of keep in touch with the Atlas group generally, get a sense of what other people are doing, and we find some people to go atlasing with, or just get some questions answered about how to go about doing it. So.
All right, I'm going to stop our recording.